Welcome to Happy Talks with Dr. Alice and Donovan. Dr. Alice Fong is a holistic naturopathic doctor and founder of Amor de Soi Wellness. And Donovan Jensen is a software engineer and founder of HowToHappy.com. Together, they're out to cause more happiness in the world.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Happy Talks. My name is Dr. Alice, and this is Donovan. And today we are going to talk about self-reflection and what that looks like and why it's important. So Donovan, what are your thoughts about self-reflection and your experience with that?
Yeah, so I think it's pretty critical as a tool. And when I say as a tool, there's like many smaller tools that filter up into self-reflection. There are many different ways that you can like choose to reflect on your life. But speaking generically, like I think it's a really effective tool and in fact critical for determining what it is in your life that you want to like continue and what it is that you don't. And it's also a very necessary tool for building a life that's going to make you happy. Because I don't think it's very frequent, or at least it's not the norm, that people just haphazardly stumble into happiness and a good life, right? Most of the time, when you talk to someone that, maybe they're starting to have some realizations or do some reflection or something, and they look back, they see like this path that was laid out for them. Which is super, super common, is like walking a path that's like, you have to go to college, you have to get a degree, you have to do this thing, then you find someone to marry, then you have kids, then you buy a house, or I guess maybe buy a house before, like whatever. I don't think I got the order of that right at all. But, right. It's like this predetermined path. And a lot of people end up like walking on these types of paths. And there are other ones, right? Like certain individuals from certain places may have pressure to be like a doctor or a lawyer only. Like those are the career paths, or like, anyway, there's all these things. And a lot of people just kind of start walking down these paths and get a very, very far way without actually taking time to slow down and think about what it is they really do want. And that's where you get all these stories of people who, and can happen at basically any age, like 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, that are like, whoa, hold on. Like, what is this life that I built for myself? Like, what is this? So I think with, intentional self-reflection and kind of getting into the habit of doing some format, maybe we can dig into that a little bit more as we go, but doing that on a regular basis helps us to not walk down super far along this path that we may or may not have made a conscious decision to follow, and allows us to kind of, take a few steps, look around and say like, okay, do I like the path I'm on? Take a few more steps and then, course correct more and more as we go to end up in the places that we want to be and walk along that path. So that's kind of my first initial thoughts. I'd be curious what you think.
Yeah, no, I have a sense of agreement with what you're saying, and that like I think people just get in this like, this is what you're supposed to do. So they get in line with what society tells them to do, and then they find themselves. And I see this a lot where people kind of discover themselves and what they want out of life well into their adulthoods, or even post-marriage or pre-marriage or whatever phase that might be. Or sometimes I've had people start a new career. I've met plenty of people who start a new career in their 60s or 70s, even at that point. And I'm just like, okay, that's cool and all, and it's great. It's better late than never. But it's just like, I think maybe just reflecting during those times, like if you were just in this mundane job that you hated and you just kind of went along with it because you felt like that was what you were supposed to do, then that would have been an optimal time to self-reflect and really see what would have made a difference. Does this fulfill me in life? Does this bring me joy? I think those are really important questions to ask. And yeah, there's totally an aspect of life where you really need to provide for yourself and your family, but also keeping in mind of that it's possible to have both potentially if you explore and reflect and think about, okay, I can provide for my family, and what are those things in life that would give me a sense of fulfillment and joy. Although I do want to make the distinction of, I think when I think of self-reflection, I think the area where people can get confused or lost or just maybe misunderstood about it is just like, I don't want you to overly obsess about, oh, if I don't have a pathway, then I'm just like, I'm effed, just like, or not, or they're like stressing and anxious about that future because it's not figured out. And it's okay. It's just really an opportunity. It's like, you don't necessarily have to have those concrete goals established. It's just like thinking and reflecting and just analyzing and evaluating, just like, how does your current situation make you feel? Like, where do you want to go? Thinking about what would it take to get you there, but not like dwelling in the anxiety or kind of dwelling in the past of like, oh, I should have done this, I should have done that differently, because you can't change the past. The past is the past. So you just gotta get over it and like start in the present. And it's like, what can I do moving forward to really get to where I want? And if you don't know what you want or what it is that you want in your life, then reflection is perfect in those moments of just like beginning that process to look of what actually gets me excited. I don't know if people are asking themselves that enough.
Yeah, and I think that really resonates with something I've seen too, which is, like a lot of people don't have that full entire path laid out for them. They don't know what they want to be doing in 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, but that's totally fine. Like that doesn't have to be the goal. And honestly, for like a lot of people, like if you think back to whatever you wanted to be as a kid, and everyone else what they wanted to be as a kid, like there was only 3 options. So, and I don't think everyone filtered into just those 3 like jobs, right? So like a lot of times, from whatever position we're in, we can't really see what's going to happen that far down the line. Now, if you have an idea and you know what you want to do, that's awesome. I think that's more rare than it seems, right? Because you hear stuff like follow your passion, and like so many people I've met are just like, I don't even know. I don't even know what I want to do. And I think it's like, just to echo what you said, I think it's equally valuable to reflect and even just look at small steps you want to take. Like if 10 years is too long, where do you want to be in 5? 5 is too long, where do you want to be at the end of this year? That's too long, where do you want to be at the end of this month? What are you doing today that you like or don't like? Like you can really get as granular as makes sense. And you don't need to have this huge giant path laid out, right? Like you can take a relatively small amount of information or relatively like tight and close to your experience now and use that to kind of inform some of your decisions. And like you were saying, like if you don't have it all planned out, it's not something to like super freak out about. But reflection can give you the peace of mind or the knowledge that you've made the choice for either, following a certain path or saying, hey, you know what, maybe there's this opportunity over here. I have no idea what it's going to bring or where it's going to take me or what I want out of it, but I'm going to like go down this way a little bit. And I think it just gives you a little bit more control than this haphazard, like, well, I guess I did this because I was supposed to do it. And then I did this other thing because I was supposed to do it. Like the reflection is kind of a precursor to making choices. And it lets you have more of a sense of agency over the things that like you do.
Totally. Yes, absolutely. And I think, thinking about that, where I feel like people get caught up in this, like, oh, there's a resistance to picking a pathway, maybe because they feel like they're going to be stuck in that and they're not sure if that's even going to be fulfilling for that. They want to explore it, but they're kind of stopped by like, well, I'm not even confident in that being like, but realize that it doesn't mean if you get into it for a few years and you decide, actually, this isn't what I want to do, that it's okay. People transition from career industries all the time. And it's like, at least you will know that, hey, this wasn't the pathway. So, what did I gain? What valuable experience did I gain from that? What can I reflect to pivot and to be okay with the idea of pivoting? And that means you might have to start over again, but it doesn't mean you're starting from square one per se. You can utilize whatever skills you gathered from that new career path into a second career path. And it's like, sometimes I see people transitioning a lot. I'd say it is important to kind of like stick it out a little bit, before you kind of call it quits, just so you know fully if it makes sense for you, if it gives you that sense of fulfillment and actually pays the bills as well. Stick it out a little bit to find out, really discover all in. If you're just kind of like dipping a toe in once in a while and then you're like, well, this is not going to be it. How can you really know for sure if this is really the pathway for you, unless you like go into it more fully? But to be okay with, if this is the career for, instead of thinking of it, okay, this is, I really got to decide on my career for the rest of my life, and this is it. This is like my last shot. It's like, that's not necessarily. Maybe you could just think of it, okay, this is going to be my career path for the next 3 to 5 years. And then at that point, I can decide, do I want to pivot or do I want to continue in this path or not?
Yeah, I agree. I think a lot of people don't recognize that there are options, particularly speaking in careers, like there
Yeah.
are options that are lateral moves or like tangential moves to a lot of career paths that you can just utilize a lot of the same skills and either, you know, quickly ramp back up to roughly whatever the equivalent is for what you were doing before, or basically just move exactly lateral, right? Like just do something different, but with the skills you already have. And, you know, again, going back to just this like reflection idea, like sometimes we have these projections of things and how we think they're going to be, like you were saying, and we need the actual experience to fill out whether or not it's something we enjoy. And that's a part of the process. Like, I think we talked about it before, when it's like when I'm writing, right? Before I start writing, I project it as just like, oh, this is going to be terrible. And then as soon as I start, it's fine. Right. And in the same way, like there are all kinds of things that like influence your well-being that kind of fit along this pathway. And I think it parallels nicely with like what you were saying parallels nicely with like CrossFit or snowboarding or something, right? Like you have to give it a full try before you can decide if you like it or not. If you just go once, you're probably going to not like it. Like it's probably going to be pretty rough.
Yeah, it's gonna wreck you first time.
Or like I played soccer for a bunch of years. And I think the first year, maybe the first 2 years, I did not want to play at all. My mom made me do it, and I hated it. I hated every second of it. And then once I started like learning the game, getting some skill, like now it's something. It sucks that I can't really play because everything's shut down. But it's one of the things that, aside from this year, has been a consistent source of joy in my life and connection, right? And like, had I gone with my gut feeling as a kid of just like, I don't want to do this. Like I would have never. So in the same way, you know, if we're going to try something new to see if we like it and see if it can add value to our life, like you said, you have to get past that first class, that first time down the mountain, that first game, whatever, because that's almost always going to be harder, rougher as you learn. And then once, you know, you get a month in, or, you know, if it's a career change, it might be a year or two. Then you can sit back and reflect accurately about the experience and say like, okay, here's what I like, here's what I don't like. And going back to the career path thing, you can kind of take the pieces you like and go, oh, are there any other jobs where I can just do a lot more of this and a lot less of this other stuff that I don't like?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I think the thing that holds people back is just like, starting over is scary. It's very unknown, and you're probably going to suck at it in the beginning as you're learning like a new skill set or whatever that career or task or hobby or whatever it is that you're learning. It will, you're not going to be a pro right off the bat. Nobody is a pro expert right off the bat. There's that learning curve. So I think it's like this fear of failure or a fear of just sucking at it that is uncomfortable for anyone. But it's just like, you have to get to it. You have to learn, you know, maybe you're not going to be a master right away, but just learn to become proficient in it. And then you can kind of get a better sense of this is, you might actually enjoy it. Yes, there's that learning curve, but you know, it could be the thing that really brings you joy and giving you clear direction on where it is that you want to go.
And I think that ties back in nicely to this idea of, you know, reflection, right? And, you know, if what you're currently doing is super lighting you up every day and you love it, and every time you reflect, you're like, this is the best possible life, then great. Like maybe you don't need to go out and like explore some other things. But, you know, if you're spending a lot of your time doing some sort of activity that you don't enjoy, you know, you reflect, you figure out like, oh, I don't really like this. The only way to figure out what you do like is to go out and explore new things. And the thing is like you're just saying, like, it can be uncomfortable to kind of like go through that learning process or that growth process, but you're basically trading that off against being uncomfortable in just a different way, in either like boredom or just like doing tasks you don't like or whatever. So like either way, you're going to experience like some amount of negative states if you're doing something you don't like already. But the difference is, by trying a new thing, you may not like it temporarily, but then it may become something nice. So that's like kind of the way that I look at some of those things, or like how I have in the past, to push me through that initial piece is like, hey, if I wasn't learning coding, what I would be doing is taking calls at a phone center. Like, just like
Right.
trading off these two things of like, if I wasn't doing this, I would be doing something that I also don't like. So let's take this path and see where it goes, because I know what the other path already is.
Mhm. Yeah, definitely. And shifting gears a little bit just into, because we focused a lot on the career, but I also want to think about self-reflection on like an interpersonal level between relationships or your interactions with people. And, I think the rabbit hole that people might get caught up in is they might confuse self-reflection with like being self-critical. And that's kind of something I want to distinguish, in that it can be, in my opinion, this is just my opinion, take it with a grain of salt, but just like in my opinion, self-reflection isn't to just like harp on ourselves and be mean to ourselves. I think it's good to be honest, like really authentically look at how we've been being and how that's impacting our life, our various aspects of our life, and our people in our lives or our careers. But to not necessarily like to look at it honestly, but without judgment, I think is the hard part, without being critical, like, oh, you suck, you're a terrible person, like that negative self-talk, but to just be like, wow, I did this thing that wasn't, I'm trying to think of an example, like, I had this conflict with my boss, and it was just really, and he's such a dick, and I just like, but then you're like, you reflect and be like, okay, how was I being in that interaction? And, was I the nicest person, or was I a little snippy or something to that? Or like, what could I have done to shift the energy of that conversation potentially? So just like self-reflecting and evaluating my actions, my thoughts in a way where I can be more efficient or effective the next time it happens and I encounter a situation like that, but not necessarily saying like, oh, I suck. Well, and this person's a B or whatever that might be, or just like being critical. Like you get what I'm saying. I don't know if I'm really getting clear on what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I think it makes sense to me. I'll try to paraphrase and you tell me if this.
Yeah.
Yeah. Basically, like, and I look at it sort of the same way. But when I do reflection, I'm not looking to add any sort of judgment. And in fact, I very mindfully try to catch any judgment I have of quality, whether things are good or bad, and
Right.
kind of like combat those thoughts. What I'm looking for is the most realistic like evaluation that I can make, and ways that I can modify the outcomes, right? So let's say I have a conflict with my boss, right? Like you said, for me, it's not like this person sucks, I suck. It's not, right, because those are judgments. The way I look at it is like, what happened and what was the outcome? What points did I have influence in the outcome? Right? Like that's the way that I would look at it. And none of that is charged with any kind of like, this was good and this was bad. Like this took me further away from the outcome I wanted. This could have gotten me closer.
Exactly.
And that's the way that like when I do self-reflection, I try to do. Now, obviously it's a little bit easier said than done, like especially if you're in an emotional state, like those judgments can creep in really easily.
Right.
But they don't really add anything to your ability to make better decisions or influence outcomes in the future. So the more you can reduce those, the better. The one time in this realm that I think it is useful, or at least is like part of the process, is when you're kind of reflecting on your internal state, right? As opposed to outcomes out in the world, but like you're reflecting on, oh, how do I feel? Like what happened? Why do I feel this way? So if you turn your reflection in that way a little bit, the judgments, again, I don't ever think I'm going to say you should buy into them, but like analyzing and picking them apart a little bit more is more useful when you have your reflection turned internally a little bit more.
Right. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, just kind of a thought that popped into my mind of just looking at maybe like a relationship perhaps that you're involved in. And let's say just an example of kind of what you were saying is, maybe if I nag my partner about the dishes, he's always leaving dishes in the sink, and it annoys me. It really annoys me. But I realize like nagging him about it doesn't necessarily produce the outcome that I want. it just produces him being annoyed with me and not actually necessarily getting it done. So my self-reflection would be like, okay, nagging is not accomplishing the outcome that I want. And maybe even if I say it very sweetly and nicely, still might not get to the outcome. But I realize that nagging is not necessarily productive for our relationship. So I have to really like rein it in and think of like, what am I doing? What am I experiencing? I'm experiencing like upset and annoyance. And, is it really like that big of a deal? Can I actually rein in my reactive emotions and be like, okay, that I do get that he will get to it in time. Maybe it's not right away. And do I really need those dishes done right away? So it takes something sometimes for me to like rein it in my emotions to know that it will get done, maybe just not in the timely fashion that I would like. And that is okay. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think it's a good story to kind of transition us a little bit too into the actual process, right? Because
Yeah.
I noticed as you were talking a couple different things. One of the main ones was when you're doing, that reflection,
Mhm.
you're asking yourself a lot of questions, right?
Yeah.
Is it really that important? Is there a better way to approach this? Is there something else that I could do that wouldn't damage the relationship as much or have a negative impact?
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the core elements of like the actual process of doing self-reflection, right?
Yeah.
Because earlier I talked about like there being a bunch of different tools.
Mhm.
I would be curious. I have a couple, so I can go if you don't, but I'd be curious if you have any like steps or processes that you generally try to use for reflection.
I think for me, it's just like take a moment when I'm noticing myself feeling upset or annoyed about something. And instinctually, I want to just call him out and like, like say it. But it's like, it's literally like reining myself in and being like, taking a moment to reflect and like think the question I ask myself is what I'm going to say going to be productive for what I want to accomplish? And then I think about it and I'm like, yeah, saying that is probably not going to be productive for getting the thing that I want done. And it's not going to be productive in building a loving quality relationship, which is another important outcome that I want to create. Like if I continue to be that nag, that does not create a sense of love and connection that I would like. So it does take something to like take a breath and just ask myself, is this going to be productive for what I want to accomplish? And I think that gives me a moment to like, okay, saying that snippy thing is probably not going to be helpful in this situation. So that's my kind of go-to thing. And I don't always catch myself. And sometimes I mess it up. And then I like actually a good example where my partner did it to me, where yesterday we brought on a foster dog, which was a lot. And there was like so much poop and so much like, and then one of the dogs got like a bloody paw. So there was like bloody and poopy paw prints and just, it was just like a mess. And then there was like, my dog had like exploded a bunch of paper too. So it was just like me cleaning up a lot of stuff like throughout the day. And so ultimately I left like the coffee thing not clean because I was cleaning a bunch of bazillion other messes that day. And then my partner gets home and then he was like, seeing the coffee thing, and then he was like, it'd be nice if you just like clean this. And I was just like tearing it just was like tearing it. I was like, I usually do, and I've been cleaning shit all day long. So yes. So but he caught himself because he was like, oh yes, I acknowledge you for all the cleaning that you've done all day long. And I was like, okay. But it was just definitely agitated from that state. But yeah, speaking of like, I did not catch myself in that moment because I tore his head off after the stressful day that I had. But when I'm like a little more, okay, is this gonna be productive? And I gotta like reflect on, where is he coming from? And he just kind of did it in the moment, not thinking about it. He was not thinking about, would this be productive? Common to say after the day she's had. No, if he actually thought of it. But then he caught himself, he apologized, he cleaned it up, and then we were fine. So yeah, sometimes you do mess up and you don't always catch yourself, but you can always apologize and be like, oh my goodness, sorry, I wasn't being like present to if this would be productive or not.
Yeah, no, that's great. And that's actually almost exactly one of the main strategies that I use too, is I try to catch when I feel emotions starting to
Hmm.
rise.
Yeah.
Like you said, I don't always catch it, but when I feel them starting to rise, I try to be like, okay,
Yeah.
wait, hold on, what's going on? Before I like jump on this train and just flip out and whatever happens, like
Yeah.
let's see if I can slow this down and make sure that my next couple choices are good. And then,
Yeah.
it doesn't always work. So
Mhm.
another key point for me, which you said the exact same thing, is
Mhm.
if I have had a highly emotional experience, that's a
Yeah.
time where I do kind of a retrospective, right? I like sit down, take some time and go like, okay, I was like high emotions.
Mhm.
What caused this? What actions did I take? What happened? And because a lot of times that's informative to me for the future, right? A lot of times it's like, oh, like here's the point where I really screwed up and said the wrong thing and threw the whole thing down the drain. Uh,
Right. Yeah.
and I think it's an incremental process too, right? Like there's definitely been times where I'm like, oh, I identified I shouldn't do this thing. Then 5 minutes later, I do it, and I'm like, ah, come on.
Ooh, yeah.
So it's definitely, every time that I notice it though, there's just a little bit higher chance that next time I'm going to make a better choice or catch the emotion earlier or do whatever it is in a more
Right.
beneficial way. The other type of reflection that I do pretty regularly is journaling, and you could probably do this without actually, writing it out. But to me, it's kind of the opposite of this like high emotional state
Yeah.
reflection, right? Which is
Mhm.
kind of just going throughout what normally are just typical days
Mhm.
and writing out some of the highlights.
Mhm.
And to me, the benefit here is, the benefit of the other style of reflection is like you recognize how to like get better outcomes for these like higher intensity situations where you don't have as much time to make choices.
Right.
This other reflection, this like daily reflection that
Mhm.
I do, generates data for me so that I can go back and see if there are trends, see if there are things that are showing up that are impacting my well-being,
Mhm.
and that maybe I need to make some sort of adjustment. So one of the things in the past, for example, was I noticed there was a lot of days where my quality or duration of sleep was
Mhm.
jacked. And it was not something that like I noticed in any individual day, right?
Yeah.
I wasn't, like, oh man, I must have like a weird sleep schedule, but it'd be like, I'm tired today, like I don't think I slept that well. And then going back, I could go back through that data and be like, okay, hold on a second. This is
Yeah.
happening like 4 or 5 times a week. Like
Mhm.
I got to change something here. Like,
Yeah.
well, what is this? Is this light? Is this noise? Is this not having a consistent bedtime? Is this like drinking too close to going to sleep? Like what factors are contributing to this? And then
Mhm.
I was able to make some adjustments, and then like my sleep schedule is much tighter now.
Mm.
So I think that is just another realm or way that self-reflection has really helped me. And it's
Yeah.
more of this like low intensity, like
Mhm.
kind of constant thing. Another thing
Yeah.
that works is, for me at least, is for certain attributes that I want to work on or reflect on, but I'm not
Mhm.
100% sure about the data. So
Mhm.
in the past, like working out, like I'm pretty sure I work out pretty well.
Yeah.
I don't know for sure until I track the data, right? So it's another
Yeah.
it's like a very very light form of reflection, but basically like you can check off like, oh, I went on Monday, I went on Tuesday, and then later you can go back and say like, does this data that I collected match my belief about my actions? Like, am I actually working out most of the week, or am I totally tricking myself and I usually work out twice a week?
Right.
That has also been really, really useful for me, is just like having an idea, generating some data, and looking back on it. So those are the other like styles or ways that I can
Mm.
think of off the top of my head that I've used reflection.
Yeah, and that's a really great way to kind of know and track your progress if you're moving in the right direction of where you want to go with your goals. And thinking of the workout example, and yeah, I just realized that, I didn't always do this initially, but because I do CrossFit, we're always entering in our scores at the end of like, we have like a weightlifting section, and then we have a Metcon, and that's more cardio stuff. And definitely feel like I'm making more gains in the weight and not so much the cardio. So feel pretty, but it's just like nice to know where my strengths and weaknesses are and where I could continue to grow. And also to know like, okay, I lifted this amount this many months ago. I should be able to PR or do a personal record today. I feel like because I've made some gains, and so it's always like a win when I like get a new PR for one of my weightlifting, because there's so many different ones that I could be doing, but I'm still like working out my whole body. But it's just like, how much progress am I making? It's good to know, and to know that it is progress rather than if I was just kind of doing the same type of workout every day. I don't know if I'm getting better or not really. But actually, just another thing of just like writing and documenting things as another avenue to benefit the self-reflection aspect. I was just thinking when you were sharing that, like journaling for yourself. But I know when when I've had like relationship conflicts in my life, or I was really upset with someone, where I just wanted to like go off on them, like taking a moment, just writing it all out in like, and sometimes I'll write it out in an email, but I don't send it to them, because then it gives me space and time to like read it over, realize that it's a little, maybe I shouldn't be saying all of this stuff, and like really trim it down to make it more productive, where I can like look at like, okay, what am I feeling? I want to get my feelings across, but I want to do it in a productive way. So that way I can just like spit it all out without the fear of like, how is this going to impact this other person? Because they haven't seen it yet. So I can like clean it up a little so it can be a little more productive in that sense. And that's been really helpful. Sometimes I had in the past where I'd write like super long emails expressing everything and anything, and it'd be like 3 or 4 pages, and then they get overwhelmed. So now I'm just like, I'll write it out. I'm just not going to send it until I feel like I've gotten time to kind of come down from the emotions and really reflect on what would make it productive and more concise and more digestible for the person viewing it. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's great because a lot of times when you're in those situations, there's just all this stuff that's like in your
Yeah.
mind, and we have the problem of being ourselves. So it's a little bit hard to get an objective view of what we're about to say or do. So yeah,
Right.
I like writing it out. I mean, it's still you, it's still your writing or whatever, but it gives you a little bit more space between
Right.
just the raw flow of emotion and thoughts and
Right.
what it is that you're actually trying to communicate. Because I have definitely done that before and then looked back and read the thing, and I was like, I'm
Just
so
like,
glad that I did not say this or say this. Like,
right.
cool, I knew why I felt that way, but like,
Yeah.
this is not going to be productive for this relationship at all.
Right. Yeah, totally. Absolutely. Awesome. Well, do you have any other thoughts about self-reflection before we wrap up today?
Yeah, there's one point, I don't know if I made it earlier, but one thing that I want to touch on is just that the frequency of reflection, I think, is
Mhm.
pretty useful. Like, just going back to what I was saying at the
Yeah.
start, like,
Mhm.
you know, it allows you to kind of take these steps, and the more time passes between any sort of reflection, the more likely it is that you've walked along a path that you may not be super excited about. And again,
Right.
like you said, the only thing you can do is course correct from where you are, but it's
Yeah.
so much easier when you've been looking at each incremental step. But
Mhm.
that being said, I do think it's valuable to take longer views too. If you don't have them, that's okay, but like occasionally taking a look at, like, okay, instead of just the day-to-day stuff or just the week stuff or whatever, like, what have I done in the last year, what have I done in the last 3 years, in the last 5 years, like, what do I actually care about and what is driving me? Because in the same way that you can walk way down a path and end up somewhere that you have no idea how you got there, you can also make these little incremental steps, incremental, and then look back and be like, wait a minute, every individual little step seemed right, but like somehow I ended up all the way over here. So I think it's worth
Right.
just occasionally, like, you
Yeah.
know, changing the granularity of the reflections that you do, so
Mhm.
that you can see, like, okay, what can I change in my life right now? What can I change in my future choices? How's my past, impacted me? And just give yourself a really full picture of what is in your life and the things that you can adjust to improve your well-being.
Absolutely. Yeah, makes sense. Good points. Awesome. Well, thank you everyone for tuning in today for this week's episode, and we'll see you next time.
You can check out more content at howtohappy.com. Also, don't forget to subscribe so you can stay up to date on the videos. We've also got a Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook that you can check out. Reflect, take action, and enjoy life. See you next time.